Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly through narrow back streets under a paper-thin moon, one calloused hand steadying the yoke across your shoulders, the other clutching a flickering oil lamp. Your destination? The darkest corners of ancient Chang'an, capital of the Tang dynasty, and one of the most heavily populated cities on Earth at the time. But you're not heading out to party, pray, or patrol. Nope. You're out to collect something most people would sprint the other way to avoid. Human waste. Buckets of it. You're the neighborhood night soil collector, and whether or not you think you're ready, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck beneath a sagging eave, eyes adjusting to the silver-black contrast of moonlight on stone. It's quiet, save for the faint murmur of wind, the occasional cough from within shuttered homes, and the soft clink of your bucket handles tapping rhythmically as you walk. You've got about a dozen stops tonight, give or take a few surprise additions, because people don't exactly schedule their bowel movements. And don't let the job title fool you. Night soil collector. Sounds poetic, but your work is about as romantic as a slap with a fish. The reality is this: people poop, and someone has to clean it up. That someone is you. Paid by the pail. Or sometimes by the pile. Historically, night soil, the polite euphemism for human waste, was both a curse and a commodity. Ancient Chinese cities like Chang'an couldn't rely on running water or plumbing the way we do. Public and private latrines fed into ceramic pots, pit holes, or, if you were wealthy, a sleek chamber pot with decorative flourishes you really wish hadn't been wasted on such an unholy function. You move quickly, trained to hear the subtle wooden knock of a household signal, a tap that means a bucket needs emptying. Sometimes, a sleepy servant will hand it off. Sometimes, you're greeted by a grunt and silence. And once in a while, you knock, and something inside growls back. Ghost? Dog? You don't wait to find out. Tonight, your route snakes through the old artisan quarter. The alleys here smell like sesame oil, sawdust, and fermented miso, all of which do an impressive job of not covering the reek coming from your growing cargo. But you've got tricks. A smear of medicinal balm under your nose, made from camphor and crushed chrysanthemum, helps a bit. One collector swears by chewing a clove of raw garlic to numb the sinuses. Another keeps a small bag of dried tangerine peel tied around his neck. You just breathe through your mouth and try not to think about soup. Historians still argue whether the profession was state-sanctioned or mostly informal during the Tang dynasty. There are records of city officials issuing guidelines for waste disposal and even assigning waste routes to licensed haulers. But scholars debate how widespread or enforceable these mandates really were. What's clear, though, is that without your work, the city would drown in its own filth faster than an ox cart stuck in a summer flood. You pause beside a clay-walled inn, its outer courtyard latrine designated for guests. The smell hits before you're even through the gate. A crooked sign marks it as a shared facility, which means the bucket is full, overused, and very much your problem now. You heave it onto your yoke with practiced grimace, balancing it against the other one already sloshing slightly as you move. There's an unspoken etiquette to your work. Never spill. Never talk about what you saw in the waste, though you'll think about that dinner someone didn't finish, ugh, still steaming. And never, ever let yourself get complacent. One misstep on a slick cobble, and you're not just covered, you're cursed. The collectors say it happens once to every beginner. Just once. Then you learn. You pass a closed apothecary. The herbalist there pays a premium for certain, aged, specimens, waste left to sit under a covered jar until it ferments. You're not sure why. Some claim it enhances certain remedies. Others whisper about magical salves and tonics derived from what would, in modern times, get someone banned from the internet. The night air grows colder as you turn into the scholar's ward. These residents are fussy, wealthy, and wary of being seen, even by someone they rely on. You often arrive here last, lest you be spotted by a client's acquaintance. Your footsteps soften on polished stone. You knock 3 times, pause, knock once more. The door opens just enough for a pale arm to pass a lidded pot through the gap. No eye contact. No words. Just business. You load it gently, making mental notes. Jade inlays on the handle. Silk ribbons on the side. Somebody's got status, or at least aspirations. You haven't seen another collector tonight. Sometimes you do, usually at the crack of dawn, heading in the opposite direction. If you nod, you're lucky. Most keep their heads down. The job marks you, even in darkness. It stains your clothes, your hands, your reputation. Some say even your soul gets a little browner. But here's the funny thing, your job is critical. Indispensable, even. Waste was used to fertilize fields, to balance soil pH, and to enrich compost before synthetic alternatives were even a fantasy. And night soil collectors like you were the invisible gears that kept urban agriculture running. Without your nightly grind, there'd be no food for the morning market. A rat skitters by, and you barely flinch. They're part of the scenery. They know the routes better than you do. And sometimes they follow. You reach your final pickup, a backroom tea house that rents latrine access by the hour. You hoist the pot, double knot the lid, and sling it on with a grunt. Your shoulders burn. Your feet ache. But your buckets are full, and that's tonight's paycheck. Your shift's just begun, and already your neck protests the wooden yoke pressing deep into your shoulders. But you can't blame the pull, it's been doing its job for years. Polished smooth by the grime of routine, carved from sturdy bamboo that flexes just enough to absorb the jolt of a full bucket swinging with every step. It's a tool that's been used for centuries, cheap, reliable, renewable. Like you? The night soil trade doesn't require a university degree. What it does require is a pretty specific toolbox. Let's take inventory while you trudge through the silted back alleys near the western gate. First, the buckets. Most are wood, bound with iron hoops, and patched with resin to stop leaks. Some are so old they creak like ship hulls. Others are newer, thicker, heavier, less trustworthy. You've got a favorite, of course, the one with the dragonfly carved into its handle. Balance is just right. Doesn't slosh when the load shifts. Then there's the yoke, which you already feel cutting into your skin. That thing's your silent co-worker. A proper collector knows his yoke like a swordsman knows his blade. Some pad theirs with cloth or old rope, but you've toughened up to it. Or maybe you've just gone numb. You carry a long-handled ladle too. Not for soup, nope, definitely not. It's a scoop for when a pot needs topping off into your bucket. The ladle's carved from gourd or wood and looks almost innocent in the lamplight. But one whiff will tell you it's been places no ladle was meant to go. Next, you've got rags. A whole stash tied to your belt. Some are for wiping spills. Others are your poor man's PPE. Wrap one around your face, breathe through another, tie a third to your ankle just in case the foot splash gods are in a mood tonight. And you never go out without your hook. That's not a pirate thing. It's a small iron rod, curved at the end, used to lift heavy lids off stone privies or to fish out pots wedged too tight between floorboards. You've heard horror stories of collectors dislocating a shoulder trying to wrestle a chamber pot free. Historians still argue whether some households intentionally jammed their pots to avoid full fees. It's possible. Some people hate paying for a service they pretend doesn't exist. Around your waist, there's a leather pouch with your sweeteners, little pouches of herbal mixes to tuck under your scarf. One guy you know mixes star anise, clove, and powdered mint. Another swears by crushed peach blossom. You tried sandalwood once. Made you gag harder. Go figure. Some collectors carry charms, paper talismans inked by monks or talismongers, meant to ward off spirits, accidents, or sudden bower-related hauntings. You're not superstitious, but you've seen a guy trip, spill everything, and wind up blind in one eye for a week. If you think that wasn't related to a bathroom ghost, you haven't spent enough time in this line of work. Your kit also includes a tiny oil lantern. You've balanced it on your yoke's crossbar for so long, you forget it's even there. The flame flickers with every step, projecting warped shadows across alley walls like some grotesque puppet show of your profession. And yes, you carry soap. A luxury, sure, but one you learn to invest in. Not because you expect to come home clean, but because your family won't let you inside unless you scrub like a man possessed. You've set up your own washing station, outside the house, under a lean-to, with a bucket of river water and a well-worn brush. Once, your eldest refused to hug you for a week after you skipped the ritual. The shame burned hotter than any fever. What people rarely realize is that collectors like you often have side tools, items that aren't official but come in handy. A small notebook where you tally who's paid and who's a chronic avoider. A chunk of coal for marking walls with reminders. A tiny whistle, in case something really bad happens and you need help fast. Like if a privy collapses. Or a wild dog thinks your bucket smells like dinner. One collector in the Northern District has a custom-built cart, wheeled, with compartments, and even a small bell he rings before turning corners. The kids call him the Tinkling Reaper. Not exactly flattering, but hey, branding is branding. You, though, prefer the old-fashioned way. On foot. Balanced. Quiet. The fewer eyes on you, the better. Especially in neighborhoods where your presence is a tolerated inconvenience, like mice or leaking roofs. As you pause beside a shuttered market stall, adjusting your shoulder strap, you glance at your buckets in the dim light. One of them is foaming a bit, not unusual. Fermentation starts fast in the summer. And that's part of the reason your tools need to be sturdy. Night soil isn't just gross, it's alive. Teeming with microbes, gases, and things that bubble and hiss in a way no decent food ever should. There's a superstition you heard once: if your bucket sings, someone nearby is cursed. You don't believe it, of course. Except for that one night last year when your bucket let out a high-pitched wheeze and the next morning, you heard your client had choked on a fishbone and survived only because someone nearby knew how to do the Heimlich. Coincidence? Probably. But still, you knocked 3 times on wood that morning. Just in case. Tool maintenance is also part of the job. Before sleep, after your shift, you wash and dry every item, checking for splinters or cracks. A cracked bucket mid-route is not just embarrassing, it's catastrophic. Once, you saw a guy's pole snap in half during a transfer. The sound of that wood splitting was almost poetic. The aftermath was not. And let's not forget footwear. You wear padded straw sandals, not ideal, but cheap and quick to dry. Leather's too expensive and soaks in the smell. Some try going barefoot, but that's just asking for tetanus. Plus, you need the extra traction. One misstep on slick stone with a double load? That's the kind of fall that becomes a local legend. You shake your head, refocusing as your lantern dims. Time to swap the oil wick. With practiced ease, you fish the tiny vial from your belt pouch, refill the chamber, and reignite the flame with a spark stone. Light returns. Shadows retreat. Your tools are humble, but they make you efficient. Invisible. And whether or not anyone thanks you for it, you know the city depends on what you carry, and how you carry it. Without you, every courtyard and alley would become an open sewer. You shift your shoulders again, buckets swaying gently. The night is young. Your route still long. And your tools still faithful. The city sleeps, or tries to. But you? You're deep in the guts of it now, navigating the snaking alleys and clogged arteries of ancient Chang'an like a surgeon with buckets instead of scalpels. The sky's a bruised purple overhead, with a few stars clinging to visibility, while lanterns flicker behind wooden shutters, giving you little glimpses of the lives you're skimming the edges of. This part of the route is a moonlit maze of latrines. Public ones, mostly, communal brick cubicles set up by the city to keep the stink off the streets, in theory. In practice, they just relocate the problem to central hotspots that you're now tasked with cleaning out before dawn. You round a corner and stop outside a row of 6 squat cubicles behind a tea house. The doors don't lock, they don't need to. No one is rushing to visit them after dark, except you. There's a faded board above the row with faint brushstrokes marking them as officially maintained. Which is cute. You're the maintenance. There's no staff. Just your hands, your ladle, and whatever mental shielding you've developed over the years. The smell hits you like a memory you owe money to. It's worse in the humid season. Everything ferments faster. You swear it gets into your eyebrows. Tonight, it's not the worst you've faced, but it's bad enough that you rub the herbal blend under your nose twice just to cope. You wedge the hook under the first lid, lift it, and hiss through your teeth. Almost full. Black, gelatinous in places, and bubbling. Lovely. You tip it into your bucket with a practiced motion that could probably qualify as performance art if the audience weren't so easily horrified. These public latrines are high-volume zones. They serve laborers, travelers, merchants, street performers, and the occasional noble who'd rather brave the slums than use their own clogged privy. They're the crossroads of every class, united by the most basic bodily need. Equal opportunity excretion, you like to say. Historians still argue whether these public toilet setups were part of a grand urban sanitation plan or more of a slapdash response to population density. Records from the Tang court suggest funding was occasionally allocated for waste containment architecture, but implementation varied wildly between districts. Some got marble-tiled outhouses. Others got pits with a plank. And guess which one you're dealing with tonight? The second stall's even fuller. You nearly gag. You try to distract yourself by counting bricks. That doesn't help. You try humming. That also doesn't help. You sigh and ladle like you mean it. Rats scurry nearby, fat and glossy from their nightly buffet. You don't bother them and they don't bother you. It's a working relationship. You've even started to recognize a few. One has a crooked tail and a twitchy eye. You call him Magistrate Wu. Tonight, he watches you with his usual judgmental expression as you move to stall 3. It's worse. You think someone vomited in this one. Probably a traveler who wasn't ready for Chang'an's local flavor. You mutter a few insults into the bucket. Catharsis counts. Further down the lane, a domestic latrine calls you. It's a side alley job, narrower, darker, more intimate. The kind that makes you whisper as you approach. Not because anyone's asleep, but because the space itself demands quiet. These back alley loos are hidden behind screens or tucked under stairwells, often near kitchens or bath areas. People don't talk about them. They just exist. Secret, functional, and quietly horrifying. You kneel beside a round stone slab, knock twice, then lift it. Yep. It's ready. You start the transfer, and the sound it makes is artistic. You imagine trying to describe it to a court poet. Like soup slapping clay, but angrier. You chuckle at the thought, and in that moment of distraction, your balance shifts. The bucket wobbles. Your foot slips an inch. Just an inch. You freeze. That's the difference between dignity and disaster. Carefully, you steady the pull, step back, and exhale hard enough to fog the cold air. Crisis averted. But you make a mental note. That alley needs more gravel. Most collectors know the city's layout better than any map. You can navigate it blindfolded, though you hope it never comes to that. The streets wind and twist, not out of malice, but from centuries of improvisation. What used to be a road became a walkway. What used to be a shrine is now a noodle stall with a latrine next to it. You pass those noodles every shift, and not once have you been tempted. Funny how proximity ruins appetites. There's a rhythm to this work. Stop, hook, lift, pour, wipe. Adjust. Walk. Stop. You enter a kind of trance if you're not careful, a sleepy dance across cobbles, lit by firelight and guided by the rising weight of your cargo. At this point, your nose has almost numbed to the smell. Almost. But it's not just about getting the waste. Sometimes you're also the unwitting recipient of city gossip. People forget how thin walls are. You hear things, secrets, arguments, sometimes even poetry. Once, you caught the end of a conversation about a servant caught stealing incense. Another time, a whispered rendezvous between a merchant's wife and a horse groom. Waste reveals more than just what someone had for dinner. There's one stall you dread. Everyone dreads it. It's at the edge of the silk sellers district, near a well that's been rumored to be cursed. The privy there is always full beyond what's reasonable. You're convinced it's not used by people. Maybe by demons. You once joked that it's an entry point to the underworld, and that the bucket fills with the regret of the damned. No one laughed. Too close to true. Tonight, it's waiting again. You grit your teeth, approach, and lift the lid. It's somehow steaming in the cold. You sigh and get to work. This is the part of the shift that tests your resolve. When the weight of the buckets becomes more than just physical. When the smells get into your thoughts. When even the moon looks like it's holding its nose. But this is what you do. You're a collector. A cleaner. A walker of silent streets with a job no one else wants but everyone depends on. And now? Now your buckets are nearly full. You've conquered the public stalls, survived the cursed corner, and gathered more than enough for your first haul. Time to start the walk out of the maze. Toward the farms. Toward daylight. But not before one last check. You turn into a side passage, half hidden behind a burned-out lantern post. A privy most collectors skip because it's hard to reach and sometimes occupied by people sleeping rough. You knock. No answer. You knock again. Still nothing. You step in. And something scurries out. Just a cat. You exhale. Inside there's a pot. Half full. Barely worth the trouble. You take it anyway. You're barely out of the latrine maze before you hear it, the low clang of a rival's bucket echoing off stone. 1, maybe 2 streets over. The sound is unmistakable. You pause in the shadows, not to hide, exactly, but to assess. Because in this line of work, you don't just haul filth, you navigate an entire ecosystem of silent rivalries, unspoken boundaries, and back-alley turf politics. Welcome to the glamorous underworld of Night's soil collection. Competition among collectors isn't what you'd call friendly. It's more of a quiet, tense truce where everyone pretends not to see each other while silently wishing the other guy trips and drops his load into his sandal. No one talks openly about turf, but you know which alleys are yours, which households you've served for months or even years, and which public latrines fall under your care. Care, in this case, meaning desperate attempts to keep others from poaching your buckets. And yet, poaching happens. Tonight, for instance, the clang you heard? That's not a sound that should be coming from that part of the city. That stretch near the Ink Makers Guild is your route. You've been emptying their privies for over a year, and they've always paid in hard copper. Decent waste, too, those ink workers eat well. You strain to hear. Yep. Another clang. A lid being lifted. And then silence. Now you're annoyed. Because this isn't just about money. It's about pride. You do a filthy job, yes, but you do it well. And if someone's trying to elbow into your territory, that's more than disrespectful, it's war. Well, a very quiet, mostly passive-aggressive war, but still. Historians still argue whether collectors had official zones or whether territory disputes were settled through backroom deals and bribes. There are fragments of bureaucratic records from the Tang period indicating assigned waste routes in the capital, complete with rotating duties and tax forms. But many scholars believe that outside imperial oversight, most collectors drew their own invisible lines in the mud. You quicken your pace, partly to finish your route before the intruder scoops more of your regulars, partly because now you're remembering that one time 3 years ago, when someone swapped your half-filled bucket with their leaking one. You never caught them, but the smell stayed with you for days. Betrayal, thy name is fermented tofu and cabbage. You round the corner near the Ink Guild, adjusting your yoke, and knock softly at the side door. After a pause, the latch opens. The guild's night porter hands over the pot with an apologetic shrug. Someone came earlier, he murmurs. Said you were sick? You hold your face neutral, nod once, and accept the pot anyway. It's still got some weight, so the impostor didn't clean it out completely. Amateurs. They never ladle the last inch. You make a mental note to get up even earlier tomorrow. Maybe leave a few unmistakable marks on the pots. Something that says, "This is mine." Hands off. You've heard of collectors carving symbols into the handles, tying dyed cloths to the loops, or even sprinkling fine sand into the corners to track when arrivals interfered. Like a very low-budget spy drama involving poop. Still, you try not to let it consume you. Because you remember what old collector Lou used to say before he slipped on a frozen spill and retired with half his teeth missing. It's not about how many pots you collect. It's about who still calls you back. And it's true. Loyalty matters. There's a household 2 districts over that tips you extra during New Year festivals, all because you once fished their wedding ring out of a spill. You weren't technically supposed to go diving in there, but sentiment's a powerful motivator, and a better air freshener than most herbs. Of course, not all turf disputes are quiet. You've heard stories, some confirmed, others whispered in disbelief, of collectors sabotaging each other's buckets. Swapping lids, drilling tiny holes, even feeding rival routes with spoiled meat to ruin the quality of the haul. One guy allegedly smeared chili paste on another's ladle. Petty? Sure. But this is a business built on pride, pain, and the occasional bout of food poisoning. It's not just collectors you have to contend with, either. Servants can be fickle. One day, they swear you're the best. The next, they're giving their pot to some flashy newcomer with polished buckets and a smile. As if smiling makes this job any less horrific. Still, you try. You nod, you thank them, you never complain, at least not aloud. Because once they think you're replaceable, you are. You pass a cluster of water sellers packing up their carts. One nods at you with a half smile. He knows what you do. They all do. But there's a mutual respect between those who haul the city's fluids. You carry waste. They carry life. 2 sides of the same coin, really. You turn into Silk Alley and pause. There's another pot here, one you weren't expecting. Left out in the open, next to a shuttered silk merchant's door. No lid. No signal. Just there. It could be a trap. Or it could be a desperate houseguest who didn't know the rules. You weigh your options. It's not your client. But you hate leaving pots unattended. It makes the city look bad. It makes you look bad. So you scoop it. Carefully. Efficiently. With just enough judgment in your posture that if anyone's watching, they'll know this was a favor, not a theft. The rest of your route takes you through the Stonecarver's Row, where artisans live in narrow, chisel-marked homes that echo every step you take. Here, the pots are cleaner. The people more polite. They leave folded notes, thank yous, sometimes even poems. You save them. Not because they mean much, but because it's nice to feel noticed by someone who's never smelled your buckets. As you finish the last scheduled pickup, your shoulders scream for relief. The buckets are at full tilt now, sloshing, dense, warm. You've got maybe 10 more minutes before they start to feel dangerous. And that's when you hear it. Footsteps. Soft. Cautious. You turn. Another collector steps from the shadows. You recognize him, broad-shouldered bow. Works the northwest quadrant. You nod. He nods. No words. Just the faintest twitch of a smile before he disappears down the opposite lane. No turf war tonight. Just acknowledgement. A flicker of solidarity between people no one else ever wants to see. You shoulder your burden again and head for the gates. The moment you step out of the tight alleys and into the broader, moon-silvered lanes, the air shifts. Not cleaner, no, the stench is still your ever-present companion, but cooler, thinner, with a quiet that feels almost respectful. You've made it through the heart of the city's fill circuit, and now you're on the slow march outward, toward the waiting fields. The buckets on your shoulders groan with their sloshing contents, and your legs feel like chewed bamboo. But this part of the journey has its own challenge, surviving the olfactory gauntlet. If you're not familiar with the concept, let's just say this: there's gross, and then there's historically layered stench. And tonight? Tonight is one of those nights where it hits you in waves, each one worse than the last, like the city is baking a particularly heinous casserole. You pass a row of meat stalls closed since dusk, their counters still sticky with blood and fish guts. The smell has mingled with the damp earth, the sour reek of fermented tofu, and the unforgettable tang of human waste. A rich bouquet, if you're into that kind of suffering. Collectors have coping mechanisms. Yours, as usual, is equal parts stubbornness and sensory denial. Breathe shallowly. Think happy thoughts. Recite poetry in your head. One of your colleagues hums, Three Kingdoms, battle songs under his breath like he's marching to war. Another recites noodle recipes. You tried that once, just made you hungry and angry at the same time. Tonight you go with distraction. You picture the calm of your rooftop at sunrise. The way the city stretches out beneath you, silent, just for a moment, before the chaos starts again. You remind yourself that this work, wretched though it is, pays for rice, for schooling, for those new straw sandals you've been promising yourself for weeks now. Still, no herb bundle under your nose can fully block this particular assault. You try not to gag as a breeze kicks up from a nearby drain. That's where someone's dumped offal into the runoff stream. Illegal, of course, but try policing that in a city with 10,000 stomachs and only 3 inspectors who care. Some collectors use a mix called Sinxiang, literally, smell patrol. It's an aromatic powder of ground clove, dried orange peel, and cinnamon bark. Expensive stuff. You got a sample once. Didn't work. Just made the waste smell festive. But you're not just dealing with bad smells. You're also watching for dangers in the dark, broken tiles, collapsed gutters, sudden dogs. You once stepped on a dead snake. Still not sure who was more surprised, you or the snake. You swore it winked before sliding into a drain. Historians still argue whether ancient Chinese cities like Chang'an had designated odor control zones. Some sources describe government-appointed smell wardens, tasked with ensuring waste didn't accumulate too close to market stalls or religious temples. Others argue these positions were honorary or symbolic, mostly used to shame households that didn't pay their waste fees. One record tells of a house being marked with a red smear over its gate after refusing to clean its privy for a month. You've never seen that done personally, but you know which homes to avoid eating dumplings near. Your own methods for surviving the stink have evolved over time. There was the onion trick, rub a slice under your nose. Too messy. Then the salted rag. Didn't help. Now you just embrace the horror and move fast. Passing the spice merchant's storehouse, you get a blessed noseful of cinnamon and anise. You inhale deeply. A temporary reprieve. Like finding an oasis in the middle of a sewer. You linger there for a few seconds longer than necessary, savoring the warmth. Sometimes, the shop boys leave out dried ginger for you. A small kindness. Further down the street, you see lantern lights spilling from a paper screen. A tea house still open. Late gamblers. Or maybe a secret lovers' meeting. Either way, they wrinkle their noses when they glimpse you passing. You don't break stride. You've grown used to being invisible, until, of course, someone needs you. And that's the irony, isn't it? They recoil from your presence, but they're more than happy to drop a full bucket at their doorstep like it's a magical offering to be whisked away by unseen forces. You are those forces. You're the poop ghost. Boo. A little further down, you cross the bridge of Little Foxes. The name is cute. The smell is not. Underneath it is where runoff gathers and mingles with sewage from 5 surrounding districts. You hold your breath. It's worse than usual tonight. Something died down there. Maybe more than one something. Your eyes water. You power through. You reach the edge of the livestock quarter, another olfactory layer to add to the cake. Pigs. Goats. Chickens. All doing their part to keep your nose permanently traumatized. And yet, compared to human waste, animal filth almost feels rustic. Like nature's version of a bad joke. A curious bit of fringe lore from the area says that if you can walk the entire livestock quarter while holding your breath, you'll live an extra year. No one's ever made it. One guy passed out trying and face planted into a chicken coop. You helped hose him off. He still sends you pickled eggs every winter out of gratitude. Sometimes, just to cope, you categorize the smells. Rotten cabbage with mushroom overtones. Old socks soaked in vinegar and fear. Fish wrapped in disappointment. You could open a perfume counter. Eau de regret. As you near the city's outer wall, the air shifts again. It's cleaner here. Fewer people. fewer pots. The stink fades, not gone, but reduced to a murmur. Your shoulders ache, and you know you'll have the yoke marks for hours. But at least out here, the only thing chasing you is the breeze. You pass under the west gate arch. The guard, half asleep, lifts his lantern lazily. He knows you. He knows the smell. He waves you through with 2 fingers and a grumble. Outside the wall, the fields are dark, stretching out under the star-pocked sky. The farmers are still asleep. But you know where to go. There's a low-slung structure just beyond the mulberry grove. Your first delivery point. They've got compost trenches waiting, and maybe, just maybe, a cup of millet tea for you if they're feeling generous. As you cross the final stone footpath, the smell thins into cold night air. You exhale. You made it through the gauntlet. Again. You're outside the walls now, walking into the vast hush of farmland beyond the city's edge. The moon casts silver on furrowed rows and orchard shadows, and your buckets swing with the pendulum rhythm of long practice. Your boots crunch gravel as you make your way toward the compost pits, and while you never call this part of the shift pleasant, it is quieter. Room to think. Room to breathe. Well, almost breathe. The first stop is a barley farm run by an older couple who've been buying your night soil for years. You crest the final hill and spot their squat storage shed by lantern light. As you approach, the door opens with a creak, and there's old G, blinking at you like a goat caught mid-thought. "No spills tonight?" he grumbles. "Not unless you count my will to live," you reply, shifting the yoke off your shoulders with a grunt. The old man chuckles, and that's his way of showing respect. He's been a farmer long enough to know your job keeps his fields green. You unlatch the lids and hand over the goods. He checks the buckets, not because he doubts you, but because some collectors are known to dilute their load with swamp muck. You don't, of course. That would be unethical. Also, swamp muck has its own texture. Night soil isn't just useful out here, it's vital. Before chemical fertilizers were even a dream, farmers relied on human waste to enrich their soil. The nutrients, particularly nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, gave crops the boost they needed to grow strong and feed the city that, in turn, created more waste. It was a perfectly disgusting loop, but efficient. And in ancient China, it wasn't just tolerated. It was systematized. Some rural officials even kept ledgers detailing how much night soil each collector brought, how mature it was, that's a fancy way of saying fermented but not too fermented, and how often it was delivered. Historians still argue whether the government regulated this to improve yields or simply to keep the smell away from palace windows. Old G finishes his inspection and hands you a small pouch of copper coins. Not much, but it'll do. He also gives you a steamed bun wrapped in lotus leaf. Payment, kindness, or guilt, doesn't matter. You thank him and eat as you walk. Your next stop is further down, past a grove of twisted peach trees that always seem to whisper in the wind. Farmers say the grove's haunted by a scholar who choked on his own ambition. Or maybe his own scrolls, you forget which. Either way, you keep your steps light. This farm belongs to the Zhao brothers. Loud, red-faced twins who argue constantly but grow the best radishes in the district. Their compost trench is long, shallow, and already steaming from previous deliveries. You pour your buckets out carefully, watching the dark sludge glop and spread. They'll mix it with straw and ash tomorrow, turning it with crude paddles until it breaks down just enough to be usable. There's a trick to managing the waste: timing, layering, covering. Otherwise, you're not feeding crops, you're poisoning them. That's why farmers prefer certain collectors over others. Your route, for example, comes from a wealthier part of town. Better diets. Less mystery meat. They can taste the difference in their vegetables. One of the Zhao brothers stumbles out of his hut, half asleep and scratching himself. "You bring it?" he mutters, eyes barely open. "No," you say flatly. "I just walk around all night for fun." He yawns. "I like that about you. Always cheerful." He inspects the pile, nods, and tosses you a sweet potato. Payment, maybe? Or he just didn't want it. You continue on, walking along a worn path that runs parallel to a small irrigation canal. Frogs sing somewhere off in the reeds. Your buckets are lighter now, swinging empty, the yolk no longer digging into your skin with the same ferocity. Still, the ache is there, deep and familiar. A reminder of your place in the city's unglamorous food chain. Up ahead is a third farm, the one owned by Widow Lin. You like her. She never haggles. She never comments on the smell. And she always has warm water ready for your hands. You pour your remaining waste into her pit and give a nod. She presses a bundle of dried jujubes into your palm without a word. You tuck them into your pouch. They'll be a nice treat later. There's a strange intimacy to these exchanges. You're giving them something most people pretend not to think about. Something taboo. Yet here, outside the city, it's openly acknowledged, even welcomed. It's a different kind of economy, one built on necessity, not shame. Once, a scholar-turned-farmer told you that in Taoist philosophy, nothing is wasted. Everything is a cycle. Decay becomes growth. Dirt becomes life. Even excrement, he said with a smile, has its place in the Tao. You like that. It made you feel slightly less like a walking health hazard. As you walk back toward the road, the eastern sky begins to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Not yet orange, not yet pink, just less black. The kind of gray that makes shadows stretch thinner, quieter. You can feel the world beginning to stir behind the city walls. You pass a wooden signpost nailed to a tree. Someone scribbled graffiti on it. A crude drawing of a collector with stink lines coming off him, labeled "The Shoveler." You snort. It's probably meant as an insult. But you kind of like it. The road curves back toward the city now. Your buckets hang empty, save for a trace or two that will need scrubbing later. You're tired. Your knees whisper threats with each step. But your pockets have weight, and your belly has warmth. And that's enough. Behind you, the fields will grow green with barley, bok choy, and garlic. The same food that will fill the city's bowls by noon. And all of it fertilized by the unspoken work you do each night. You walk on, the breeze picking up slightly, cool against your sweat-damp tunic. In the distance, a rooster screams like it's just remembered it hates mornings. Same, you think. Same. By the time you re-enter the city, the sun is barely teasing the eastern rooftops, stretching the shadows long and golden. Your buckets, thankfully, are empty now, swinging lighter on your yoke as you navigate back through the main gate. The guards glance your way, noses wrinkling ever so slightly, but they don't say a word. Everyone knows what you do. No one talks about it. You make your way toward the outskirts of the market quarter, where farmers are already arriving with meal carts piled high with vegetables. Their breath puffs in the morning chill, and their callous hands slap reins and lift crates like they've done it since birth. And now it's your turn to trade. Because this is when your night soil really earns its name, farmer's gold. You pass a narrow courtyard shaded by ginkgo trees, and 3 collectors are already there, haggling in low tones with an onion grower. His trench coat is flecked with mud and pride, and he's pointing aggressively at one of the collector's buckets, arguing over dilution. You smirk. Rookie mistake. Never water down a load and try to sell it here. These farmers know their waste like a brewer knows his barley. Historians still argue whether the farmers of ancient China learned these soil-enhancing practices through trial and error or via codified knowledge passed through agricultural handbooks. The truth is probably both. Tang-era texts mention humanure, though in fancier terms, and some even describe different fermentation methods. Let it sit too long, and it turns to sour sludge. Too fresh, and the crops burn. There's a Goldilocks zone, and the collectors who hit it regularly become valued partners. You're one of them. The cabbage man greets you as you enter the courtyard. He smells like soil and garlic and old rope. "You've got that Scholar District mix?" he asks, practically licking his lips. "That one makes the stems stand tall." You nod and uncap your bucket just enough for a sniff test. He inhales, squints thoughtfully, then gestures you toward the back, where his ox cart waits. He gives you a bag of dried fish, 5 coins, and a chipped enamel mug of warm rice porridge. You take all three like they're sacred offerings. This isn't just barter. It's partnership. These farmers may have their own compost pits, but night soil is their booster, their miracle grow, their secret weapon. And the good stuff, the high-protein, well-digested, herb-seasoned waste from wealthier households, is basically artisanal fertilizer. You make 2 more trades like that before the sun fully crests the horizon. One man gives you fermented bean paste in a cracked jar. Another hands over a live chicken. You're not sure what you'll do with that yet. It's currently tied to your belt and clucking indignantly at your thighs. Just before leaving the market square, you see her, old Madam Chin. She's been trading with you since before you had the shoulder strength to carry a double bucket. She's missing 3 teeth and has the most terrifying stare of anyone you've ever met. But she grows the fattest leeks this side of the river, and she swears by your mix. Collector, she croaks, holding out a battered tin of sweet ginger candy. Last night's haul was fine. A bit tart. Too many students? You laugh. Exam week. Lots of stress in the diet. She nods seriously, tucks the tin into your hand, and waves you off. Sometimes you hear whispers about collectors who take shortcuts, stealing from the city sewers, siphoning waste from animal pits, or even buying cheap refuse from the bathhouse district and repackaging it as upper-tier night soil. But not you. You've built your reputation one stinking bucket at a time, and now, even with aching knees and stained sleeves, you're proud of it. There's a certain irony in it all. Your clients inside the city pretend they don't see you. They avert their eyes. They treat your buckets like cursed relics. But out here, your buckets are treasure. Farmers ask about your routes, your mix, even your fermentation schedule. It sounds absurd, but there's craftsmanship to what you do. Timing, temperature, composition. A connoisseur's nose, if you will, though no one volunteers to share your palate. And when the crops grow lush, green, and quick, when leeks shoot taller than a child's shoulder and cabbages burst like blooming stones, who do they thank? The soil. Which really means you. There's a superstition among some farmers that rubbing night soil onto the corners of your tools ensures a healthy harvest. You've watched them do it with reverence, ignoring the flies, like priests anointing sacred implements. You once asked one why? Because it's the last thing from the body before it becomes earth, he said. You didn't really know what to say to that. You just nodded and offered him an extra ladle. As you head back toward the collector depot, a crumbling structure just inside the city wall where you rinse your buckets and maybe sneak a nap, you catch a glimpse of a fellow hauler trailing behind a farmer's cart, already negotiating his next trade. You wonder what he's getting for his haul. Mustard greens? Sesame oil? Maybe something fancy like dried squid. You sit on an overturned barrel and let the breeze run across your skin. Your buckets are empty. Your yoke rests across your knees. The morning sun washes the rooftops in gold, and for a moment, you don't smell a thing. Not because it's gone, but because your nose, your body, your very soul has adapted. What would make a noble gag has become your currency. Your craft. A few crows caw above you, probably circling the market for scraps. One lands near your bucket, eyes it, thinks better, and hops away. You smile, lean back against the wall, and sip the rest of the rice porridge, letting the last of the night settle in your bones. Tomorrow, it starts again. But for now, you've delivered the gold. And the city, whether it knows it or not, is richer for it. You're halfway through scrubbing out the buckets when the inspector shows up. He's wearing the same faded robe he's had for years, the sleeves stained with ink and bureaucracy. His sandals flap with each step like lazy applause, and you can smell the cinnamon oil he dabs under his nose to avoid retching near your work. A luxury most collectors can't afford, but of course the government gives him the fancy olfactory armor. Morning, he says, in the same tone someone might use to greet a puddle that just splashed their socks. You grunt and keep scrubbing. The inspector's job is to make sure your collection and dispersal activities meet imperial hygiene codes, which is hilarious, considering the emperor's private bathhouse drains into a moat currently greener than envy. But there are rules. Tang Dynasty city law, especially in Chang'an, outlines specific guidelines for latrine placement, bucket disposal, even waste storage times. You can't leave night soil sitting inside the walls for too long, or you risk a fine, and on repeat offenses, losing your route altogether. Imperial stink control, they called it. You once saw a fellow collector get hit with a fine for a leaky lid? 3 coins for every drop that hit the street. He couldn't pay. Spent 2 nights cleaning the public latrines near the Opera District as punishment. A rough spot. Those theatergoers eat well and don't hold back. Historians still argue whether these sanitation codes were strictly enforced across all of Chang'an or whether enforcement mostly targeted lower districts. There's some evidence that wealthier neighborhoods were more lenient, or better at bribing their way out of fines. You've certainly noticed that your Scholar District pickups get away with a lot more spillage than the meat quarter ever could. The inspector walks around your buckets with exaggerated care, arms behind his back, like he's admiring a sculpture and not 2 wood-bound vats of digested stew. He jots something on his scroll. You pretend not to notice. "Everything orderly?" he asks. You look up, expression neutral. "No spirits rose from the pit and cursed me, if that's what you mean." He makes a little face. Not a laugh, not quite. But it's the most reaction you've ever gotten from him. He nods, taps his scroll twice, and wanders off. Your morning has passed inspection. You rinse the ladle last. The curved edge gleams faintly in the morning light, and you hang it from a peg on the depot wall, just as old Lu taught you. Never set it down. Never let it touch the ground. A clean scoop means fewer flies, fewer complaints, and fewer mysterious itches. With your gear scrubbed and set to dry, you sling your now weightless yoke across your back and head toward the guild office. Yes, there's a guild. Small, unimpressive, but real. The Sanitary Night Collectors of Eastern Chang'an. The sign over the door is warped, and the paint has peeled away from half the characters, so it basically reads, "Something something dirty business." But it's the thought that counts. Inside, the guild master is snoring behind a pile of ledgers. He only wakes up to count dues or settle disputes, like when someone accuses a rival of route stealing, or worse, double collecting from the same client and pocketing extra tips. You drop your logbook on the table. It's a simple system, scratch tallies showing how many pots, which blocks, and any notes worth sharing. Privy cracked, worn owner. New chamber pot at dumpling stall. Possible rat cult under spice merchant's latrine. Okay, that one's a joke. Probably. While the guild master continues his symphony of nasal exhalations, you update the chalkboard near the door. It shows who's working which routes tonight, along with special alerts. The word inspection is underlined twice in red ink, probably thanks to your encounter earlier. You make a mental note to warn the other collectors at the wash station later. As you step back out into the courtyard, you pass 2 apprentices practicing yoke lifting. One's clearly struggling, the other's just showing off. You remember your first day, your knees buckled, your arms wobbled, and you accidentally flung a quarter bucket across someone's laundry line. You're still not allowed on that block. But you got better. Everyone does. Or they quit. You make your way down to the west slope, toward the administrative office that issues the collection permits. Once a month, you've got to check in, pay your route fee, and confirm your territory. Fail to do that, and the city assumes your path is up for grabs, and someone will grab it. The clerk behind the desk barely looks up. She's surrounded by sealed documents, and a growing mountain of complaints from citizens who swear they saw a collector laughing too loud, or dripping suspicious liquids near a bakery. You scribble your signature, drop your fee into the coffer, and slide her a packet of sweet jujube paste. Not a bribe. Just tradition. You leave the office feeling oddly bureaucratic, like you just filed paperwork for a crime you haven't committed yet. The city, after all, doesn't care about the work, just the smell. You pass the Temple of Windless Mercy on the way back to your alley. They keep incense burning night and day there, supposedly to ward off foul air and wandering spirits. Some collectors believe the temple has a buried privy under its main altar, sealed by monks centuries ago. Others say that's just where they store old scrolls and dead incense. Either way, you toss a coin into the offering bowl and whisper a quiet thanks. Not for blessings. Just for still being upright and not currently covered in someone else's dinner. You pause near the herbalist's shop. A new poster is up. Boiled plum blossoms with dung tea to balance inner fire. You stare at it, trying not to imagine the process. The apothecary swears by fermented waste as a cure for everything from melancholy to foot blisters. You've sold him a few aged samples yourself. It's not your proudest trade, but the man pays well. And what is medicine if not a leap of faith into mildly revolting territory? One of your fellow collectors once joked that the line between doctor and dung dealer is just a matter of who wears cleaner robes. He wasn't wrong. You finally reach your home alley just as the first proper carts begin clattering into the market. Butchers unloading, porters shouting, children darting barefoot with morning steam buns clutched in hand. The city is waking up. And you, like the bat or the owl, are ready to vanish. You reach your door, unshoulder the yoke, and tap your feet clean against the post. A soft knock. A familiar shuffle inside. Your youngest opens the door, nose wrinkled, but grinning. "Was it extra stinky tonight?" they ask. "Only the usual," you say, stepping inside as the warmth of your home folds around you. Outside, the inspector records your path in ink. Inside, you wash your hands for the third time, pour hot water over your aching feet, and sit, silent, still, and proud. The system may never praise you. The guild may never raise your rates. But your buckets are empty, your route secure, and your house smells of ginger and rice, not rot. And for now, that's more than enough. Sleep comes in snatches, light and twitchy, the kind where every creak of the floorboards sounds like another bucket tipping over. Your body aches from neck to knees, but your brain hasn't quite shut off. Even with clean clothes, hot tea, and the soft cluck of that surprise chicken in the corner, something hums in the air like static, an unease you've learned not to ignore. It's superstition, maybe, or habit. But either way, you've been feeling it all morning. That weight in the back of your throat that says you forgot something, or something forgot you. And then it hits you. Tonight's route takes you past Lantern Alley. And that means you'll pass the Red Shrine. You sigh, already regretting it. Because that alley, that shrine, that stretch of road has a reputation, a long and bad one. People say it's haunted. That the latrine near the Red Shrine has a spirit in it. A woman who died without a proper burial. A child who drowned in the waste. A ghost with hollow eyes and no feet who whispers warnings you won't understand until it's far too late. You, of course, are a rational person. You deal with real things. Buckets. Splashes. Hunger. But even you can admit, something about that area feels wrong. Still, the pot needs collecting, and someone's paying. And your route says it's yours. That evening, as you prep your gear, your eldest slips you a scrap of red cloth. "Tie this around your wrist," they say, not quite meeting your eyes. "Just in case." You don't ask where they got it. You just nod. As you head out, the city's dusk is already deepening into indigo. The streets exhale heat from the day like warm breath off a sleeping animal. It smells like steamed rice, smoke, and something deeper underneath, something fermented and faintly metallic. Your route starts like usual. The artisan quarter, then a few wealthier courtyards whose pots are perfumed with dried chrysanthemum. You pass a spice merchant's door and nod to the cat who guards it, Old One Eye, a beast who's survived more winters than most of the residents. He watches you, tail twitching like he knows you're headed into something foul. And not just the usual. By the time you reach Lantern Alley, the streets are still and strange. The lamps here glow dimmer, even though they've just been lit. Maybe it's the fog rolling in, thin and whispering across the cobblestones. Or maybe it's that the neighbors here close their shutters early and don't look out no matter how loudly you knock. You adjust your yoke. Tighten the scarf around your mouth. Try not to think about the Red Shrine. But of course you do. It's small, barely more than a niche in a crumbling wall, lined with dusty red candles and 3 burnt sticks of incense that someone keeps replacing, though you've never seen who. A broken clay bowl sits in front of it, half filled with moldy rice and something darker. You don't look too closely. You never do. And there, beside it, is the latrine. Low to the ground. Covered in ivy. Shaped more like a trap than a place. The stone slab over the waste hole is cracked right down the middle, and the wooden lid is missing entirely. You pause. You've collected here before. Once every few weeks. The pot's never full, which is odd. Almost like people are too afraid to use it, or like someone, or something, else empties it when you're not around. You raise your hook. Tap the edge of the slab twice. Just a habit. And that's when you hear it. Not a voice. Not quite. More like breath. Sharp, short, wet. Like someone exhaling from beneath the stone. You freeze. Every hair on your neck lifts. Then nothing. Just the wind, probably. Or a cat. Or your imagination chewing on an old superstition. You bend down, try to focus on the job. You ladle quickly, keeping your movements efficient. Precise. No sloshing. No stalling. You notice the contents are strange. Pale, like chalk mixed with paste. No food remnants. No scent of ginger or garlic, or any sign that a real person deposited anything here. Just blankness. It smells of nothing. And that, more than anything, terrifies you. You finish the transfer, snap the lid on your bucket, and tie the cloth your child gave you tighter around your wrist. Then you stand, and just for a second, just a second, you see something at the corner of your vision. A shadow behind the shrine. Thin. Still. Head tilted. You turn. It's gone. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Or the mist. Or your tired mind. But your legs are already moving. You walk fast. You do not run. You know better than to run. That invites attention. You don't stop until you've made it 2 blocks down, where a noodle stall is still scraping pots and complaining loudly about rats. You stand in the corner until your breathing evens out. Historians still argue whether these urban legends about haunted latrines were products of genuine fear, convenient excuses to avoid cleanup, or early metaphors for social shame and class division. Some scholars suggest the ghost stories were invented by collectors themselves, to warn apprentices, or maybe to justify charging extra for high-risk routes. You've always thought that was nonsense. But tonight, you're not so sure. You finally resume your route, your mind buzzing with questions you don't want to ask out loud. Why was the pot so empty? Why did it smell like nothing? Why did the fog thicken just there? And what, exactly, was standing behind the shrine? You drop off the bucket's contents at a field run by monks. They say prayers over their compost. They say it purifies. You hope they're right. By the time your shift ends, the sun is once again threatening the horizon. And though your body aches the same as always, your nerves are humming. Not fear, exactly. Not yet. But awareness. When you return home, your eldest takes one look at you and asks if it happened. You say nothing. Just hand them the red cloth. They hang it on the doorway, facing east. Just in case. You sleep long and deep the next day, the kind of sleep that feels like sinking into warm clay. Your muscles are sore, your hands stiff, and your neck holds the yolk's ghost like a memory. But it's the good kind of pain, the kind that means you've earned your keep and survived another round. You wake to the sound of boiling water and soft chatter from the kitchen. Your partner has already gone to market, and your youngest is practicing writing characters in the courtyard dust. The chicken, yes, that same indignant clucker from the trade market, is somehow roosting in your shoe. As you nudge it off, there's a thought that tugs at you. No, more than a thought, a nagging truth. This job you do? It's backbreaking. It's thankless. It marks you with a stink that soap only kind of scrubs off. And yet, it's honorable. It's necessary. You walk the shadow line between what society can't talk about and what it needs to survive. And the funny thing? There's a kind of dignity in it. Sure, you're the punchline of every street kid's joke and the person noble ladies pretend doesn't exist. But when the harvest comes in fat and early, when the vegetables feed the temples, and when the city's walkways stay miraculously clean, that's because of you. You, and people like you. People who know that even the filthiest work, when done well, is a kind of art. You finish breakfast, rice, pickled greens, and a single boiled egg, and begin prepping for tonight's run. You oil your buckets, check the hooks, and repair a crack in your ladle handle with fresh twine. Your yoke still creaks, but only a little. It'll hold. Just like you. As the sun dips low again, casting the rooftops in peach and rust, you remember that tonight's run includes a stop near the tanner's district. Not your favorite smell. Or sight. But they pay well, and you've heard they're planning to expand their workshop, which means more people. More waste. More opportunity. The streets buzz as you head out. Children run barefoot, women sweep stoops, and a group of eunuchs from the palace passes silently in a litter. You bow your head out of reflex. Their silk robes make a soft whiff-whiff as they glide by, their expressions unreadable, eyes fixed ahead. You know they've got their own waste crews, discreet, efficient, operating behind palace walls. But you've heard whispers about collectors like you who get invited inside. Not often. But it happens. And those who do? They either come back wealthier than ever, or not at all. The idea of collecting waste from imperial chamber pots feels surreal. Gold-rimmed porcelain full of yesterday's dumplings. You chuckle at the thought, then shake it off. That's not your world. Your world is here, with cracked bricks underfoot and the distant smell of boiling soy. Your first pickup tonight is from a butcher's shop. They always leave the pot behind the goat pen, and you always have to chase the goats away. One of them thinks your sandal is a vegetable. You nudge it gently and collect the pot, which smells worse than usual. You ladle quickly, noting the strange bits floating near the surface. Definitely not food. You don't ask. You never ask. You transfer the waste, slap the lid on, and move on. Next is a private household, a middle-class tea merchant with a very opinionated parrot who squawks insults at you from the balcony. "Bucket boy! Bucket boy!" You salute the parrot. "Good evening, your majesty." It flutters its wings and mutters something rude in a dialect you barely recognize. You swear that bird knows too much. You knock, and a servant hands over the pot with a practiced scowl. No tip. Again. But you know better than to argue. Their family's been on your route for years, and they'll be back when the privy fills. As you walk on, you catch sight of two children playing with a wooden hoop in the street. One stops to stare at you, really stare. Not with fear. Not with disgust. Just curiosity. "Is it heavy?" he asks. You pause. "Depends on what they've been eating." He giggles, then runs off. That kind of moment sticks with you longer than you expect. Because most people look past you. Or through you. As if carrying waste means you're part of the background. But sometimes, a kid asks a question. A farmer gives you an extra sweet potato. A rival collector nods instead of scowls. And you remember, this job may be dirty, but it's yours. Historians still argue whether night soil collectors were respected within their own circles or shunned even among the working class. There are written accounts of waste haulers being refused housing in certain districts, yet archaeological evidence shows some had decent homes, families, even small plots of land. Maybe the answer's both. You're looked down on in public, but valued in private. You think of your neighbor, Widow Tang. She never speaks to you outside. But during winter, she leaves boiled peanuts on your doorstep with a note that reads, "For strong arms, warm stomachs." That night, near the tanner's district, you pass two new collectors, young, still clean-looking, still flinching at every smell. They glance at you uncertain. You nod, and one nods back. They'll learn. Or they'll quit. Your last pickup is a doozy, an overstuffed pot from a wine house that clearly hosted one too many feasts. The scent is rich with overcooked duck and regret. You balance the load carefully, nearly slipping once on a wet cobblestone. Your heart leaps. But you recover. Bucket intact. Dignity preserved. By the time you reach the compost site outside the city, The stars are high. You offload the goods, collect your payment, this time a few coins and a string of dried persimmons, and head back toward the gate. As you walk, you think about something your mentor once said years ago. We're not just hauling waste. We're hauling stories, secrets, lives in half-digested form. You didn't understand it then, but you do now. Every pot tells a tale. What someone ate, how they lived, what they left behind. And you? You're the quiet witness. The one who walks through filth so the rest of the city can walk in comfort. It's backbreaking, but it's honorable. The night's quiet again, thick with that dreamy, pre-dawn hush that settles over the city when most are asleep and the lanterns burn low. You've finished the worst of your route, and your buckets are half full, enough to make your shoulders ache but not so much that you have to wobble like a two-legged table. As you head down Drum Tower Lane, you smell something familiar and strange. Medicinal herbs. And not the sweet kind like ginseng or chrysanthemum. No, this is the sharp, rooty, nose-stabbing scent of real, serious medicine, the kind that makes your eyes water and your stomach second-guess breakfast. You slow your steps. The apothecary here sometimes trades for what you carry. Not just the usual, either. It's time to talk about what happens when your waste crosses paths with their prescriptions. Most people don't realize it, but in ancient China, some practitioners of medicine used night soil for more than just fertilizer. They used it as an ingredient. Not often. Not always openly. But it happened. Especially fermented waste from healthy people, stored for weeks in sealed jars until it reached the proper consistency. You stop at the wooden door of the apothecary and knock twice with your ladle's handle. It creaks open, and a familiar face peeks out, old Master Gui, the only man in town who smells like 5 types of mildew and calls it therapeutic. Ah, he wheezes, squinting. You brought the special harvest? You nod slowly. Mostly Scholar District. A bit from the Tanners. Nothing too spicy. He grins. It's missing more teeth than it's got, but the smile is genuine. Good balance. Scholar dung is gentle on the liver. Tanners, though, might cure heartbreak. You don't ask for details. You never do. You hand over one of your sealed jars, collected earlier that week and left to ripen behind the depot like the world's worst wine. In return, he gives you a pouch of dried plums, a slip of paper with symbols you don't recognize, and a small coin. You accept them all without question. It's not a fair trade, maybe, but it's a consistent one. And in this job, consistency is rare. Historians still argue whether the use of night soil in Chinese medicine was widespread or fringe practice. Some Tang-era texts mention its inclusion in treatments for digestive troubles, skin diseases, and even spiritual imbalance. Others dismiss it entirely, claiming these recipes were symbolic or meant as metaphors. But collectors like you? You know better. You've seen jars disappear into the backrooms of apothecaries, and you've seen people drink teas you really hope didn't contain what they smelled like. Master Gui disappears inside to prepare a tonic, and you make your escape. You've always appreciated his business, but his shop makes you feel like the walls are breathing. Back in the open air, you adjust your yoke and head toward the southern quarter. A few lanterns flicker behind fabric-draped balconies, and a dog barks from the rooftop of a noodle shop. The rest of your route includes 2 quiet pickups, one from an elderly scholar who always leaves a note on his chamber pot, regretfully full, and one from a silk dyer's apprentice who never says a word but always leaves you a sticky rice cake wrapped in lotus leaf. As you collect each pot, you can't help but glance at the contents differently now. Not just as compost, but as medicine, or at least a component of it. You wonder what Master Gui will do with the latest jar. Mix it into a foot salve? A healing tea? A poultice for someone's spiritual imbalance? Once, another collector told you that he'd heard of waste being used to treat ghost sickness. The kind that makes people see things that aren't there, hear voices, or sleepwalk to dangerous places. You laughed at the time. But after the Red Shrine last week? You don't laugh so easily now. You pause outside a side alley to sip water from your flask and sit for a moment on a step. The world is turning that slow shade of pre-dawn blue again. Your hands are raw. Your yoke digs into a permanent groove across your back. But your buckets are almost full. Your work's almost done. And then a voice calls your name. Soft. Raspy. Familiar. You look up. It's the herb seller's son, Bao. A sickly boy, thin as a broom, usually indoors. But here he is, standing barefoot on the cobblestones in a robe that's too big for him, holding something in both hands. It's from Master Gui, he says. He asked me to find you. You rise cautious. What is it? He unwraps the cloth. Inside is a dark, oily ball the size of a walnut. Medicine, he says. Made from fermented waste, lotus resin, and 10 other things I'm not allowed to name. You blink. And I'm supposed to. Deliver it, he says. Gui said you'd be by the temple next. You nod, confused but compliant. You're used to being the city's silent courier. Usually you deal in waste. Sometimes, apparently, you deal in weird fecal resin pearls. You pocket the item and continue on, but now your thoughts are spinning. If people trust night soil enough to put it into medicine, if apothecaries are willing to pay for specific types, if certain combinations are believed to affect emotions, ghosts, balance, then what exactly are you carrying every night? You glance at your buckets. Still half full. Still sloshing softly with every step. And somewhere between the alley and the temple, you realize you're not just a collector. You're a keeper of ingredients. A distributor of life cycles. And apparently, a medicine delivery boy. When you pass the temple, you leave the wrapped pearl inside the offering bowl as instructed. The monk sweeping the steps nods once without looking at you. As the last stars vanish in the soft gray of morning, you make your way home. The buckets are empty now, but your thoughts are heavier. There's power in what you carry. Not magic, maybe. Not even medicine you'd ever swallow yourself. But something old. Something potent. Something people whisper about in closed rooms while you walk the streets alone. You're not usually the type to daydream, but tonight, it hits you as you pass the carved stone lion at the mouth of Imperial Lane. What if, just once, you were invited inside? Not inside any home. Inside the palace. Because everyone in your professions heard the stories. Whispers carried from depot to depot about the Imperial Lavatory Circuit, an elite crew of collectors handpicked by eunuchs, sworn to secrecy, and paid enough to afford silk linings in their tunics. Yes, those guys. You round the corner, your buckets swinging light for now, and gaze toward the outer wall of the forbidden compound. You've never been past the second gate. Most haven't. But that doesn't stop the rumors. They say the Empress has her own set of chamber pots, cast from porcelain so fine it sings if you tap it. Each one is painted with cranes and blossoms, and perfumed with sandalwood chips changed daily. She, of course, never empties them. Neither do the servants. It's done by palace waste haulers, a rare breed of collector trusted enough to walk marble floors barefoot, so their footsteps don't echo. You once met a man who claimed he knew a guy who had a cousin who got recruited. Said they even had custom yokes carved from lacquered wood, polished to a mirror sheen. The job wasn't advertised. They just showed up one morning, cloaked and silent, and were taken inside. Historians still argue whether the Imperial Lavatory Circuit truly existed or if it was just a romanticized version of an otherwise revolting job. There's barely any record of it in official texts, which makes some scholars think it's myth. But others point to indirect evidence, royal court ledgers noting, sanitary attendance, expenses, cryptic diary entries from eunuchs, and those carved yokes sometimes found buried in forgotten storage rooms. Too elegant for common haulers. Too practical for show. You're undecided. But tonight, as you trudge up Silk Fan Street, something strange happens. A eunuch appears. Just appears, like he grew out of the shadows. Dressed in understated silk, face smooth as stone, he doesn't say a word. Just makes a gesture, a slight tilt of the chin, and waits. You pause. Point to yourself, eyebrows raised. Me? He nods. You're not stupid. You glance around. No pranksters. No rival collectors holding in laughter. Just you, your buckets, and a court official who smells like plum oil. You follow. Down 2 streets, through an unmarked gate, into a courtyard where the lanterns are shaped like lotus petals and the paving stones are warm underfoot, even at night. The eunuch opens a door, and you see it, your collection. 1 pot. Ivory-colored. Painted in red glaze with scenes of cranes flying across mountains. The lid fits so snug you could trap a fly under it, and it wouldn't escape. And the smell? Barely anything. More incense than anything else. You've never ladled this carefully in your life. You tip it like it's a newborn, transferring the contents into a clean, palace-issued bucket you're handed by another silent attendant. This one has metal corners and a woven rope handle. Fancy, yes, but functional. Of course it is. No one speaks. But everyone watches. 3 eunuchs, all nodding approval without moving their hands. You finish. They seal the bucket. Hand you a slip of silk with a mark stamped in red ink. Payment, maybe? Authorization? A secret symbol for. Don't talk about what just happened or you'll mysteriously fall down a well. You bow. Deeply. And they disappear. Just like that. You don't go home. Not yet. You go straight to the depot, where you rinse the palace bucket as if it were a sacred artifact. You even whisper to it. Don't worry. I'll scrub you gently. You don't know why. It just feels appropriate. Back at the depot, you don't tell anyone. Not yet. You just hang up your yoke, eat your sticky rice ball in silence, and think. What does this mean? Was it a test? A one-time favor? An accident? Or are you being considered? You remember what the old collector told you once, long before he retired with a bad hip and a winning smile. The higher the status, the more silent the shame. But the work? Always the same. And maybe that's the truth. Whether it's a cracked pot behind a butcher's pen or a crane-painted porcelain treasure beneath a gold-tasseled screen, it all ends up the same, in your bucket. Still, there's something thrilling about being part of a world no one talks about. The undercurrent beneath the silk. The gears behind the screen. You've always been a hauler. But now, maybe you're something more. You glance at the silk slip. There's no writing on it. Just that single, crimson mark. Round. Precise. Maybe you'll never be summoned again. Maybe this was your one brush with the golden stink of power. But you know what? Even if it was just once, you collected for the Empress. No one else has to know. You do. And that, in your world, is legend. You're halfway through your route tonight when the wind changes. And with it, the city. You feel it in your fingertips before your nose catches up. A shift. Something wrong. Summer. It's not just the heat. It's what the heat does to the buckets, the alleyways, and the bodies. Everything softens. Everything ferments faster. The usual stink becomes a roiling soup of flesh and memory. You breathe shallowly, adjusting your scarf, but it doesn't help much. Seasonal stink. A collector's least favorite phrase. Spring was bad enough, rain mixed with runoff, waste pits flooding like angry soup bowls. But summer? Summer brings cholera. Summer brings rot. Summer brings disaster nights. You step around a corner near the candle market and nearly slip on what you hope is just tofu water. Your sandals squeak on the stone, and your left bucket sloshes dangerously. You curse under your breath and double-check the knot on the lid. You remember a night like this a few years ago, hot, humid, the air thick enough to chew. A younger collector, maybe 15, misjudged a turn near the grain vendor's well and dumped an entire load into the street. Took 3 of you an hour to clean it. The vendor offered a single roasted chestnut as thanks. You still hold a grudge. These nights test your patience, your technique, your very sense of smell. But more than that, they test your timing. Because when the air gets heavy, when the waste starts gassing itself into foam and froth, you've got to move fast. Delay by even half an hour and you risk the dreaded boil, a chemical soup so aggressive, it can blow a bucket's lid clean off. You've seen it happen. Once, you watched a rookie collector run screaming as his pot frothed over like a demon's teacup. Historians still argue whether ancient Chinese cities had real disaster protocols for waste surges during the summer months. Some scrolls mention emergency collection teams, but the details are sparse. Most scholars believe it fell on whoever had the bad luck of drawing the night shift during a particularly nasty heat wave. Tonight? That's you? Your back's already slick with sweat. Your scarf clings to your neck. You reek in ways you didn't know a human could reek, and you've smelled everything. You stop by the dye merchant's back lot, an unofficial latrine site, and find not one, not two, but 5 pots waiting. They're all uncovered. They're all steaming. You nearly gag just looking at them. You mutter something about traitors to the nose, and get to work, scooping fast, steady, praying the slosh doesn't touch your bare ankle. You do the collector's dance. Ladle, dump, adjust, breathe, repeat. The air here is different. The summer heat makes the smell move, makes it hunt. It crawls into your ears, into your thoughts. You start to imagine things, like maybe the waste is sentient, or maybe this is what dying inside smells like. A rat watches you from the wall. You nod. He nods back. He understands. You reach the halfway mark, and that's when the rain starts. Not a full downpour, just a misty, irritating drizzle that turns warm street slime into a skating rink. Your grip tightens. You walk slower. You remember another disaster night, during Ghost Festival. The city was packed with tourists, offerings everywhere, and someone, some idiot, left a chamber pot atop a shrine by mistake. You had to climb the incense steps to retrieve it while people whispered and pointed. One old lady threw a peach pit at you. Said you were offending the spirits. You still kept the pot. Tonight's not quite that bad, but the smells are louder, angrier. And as the rain thickens, the heat rises from the ground in clouds. You're now operating in what collectors call soup fog, when steam from the ground and waste in the air merge to form a dense, swamp-like wall of nausea. One of your lids slips. Not far. Just a nudge. But it's enough. The smell that bursts out is foul, even by your standards. You stagger back, retching quietly behind your scarf. Your eyes water. You feel the warm splash against your sandal. You can't even be mad. You just nod slowly, like yes, of course. I deserve this. You tie the lid tighter. Say a little prayer to the god of forgotten corners and press on. And then you remember, the last stop tonight is by the North Granary. The pot there hasn't been emptied in days. The owner's been away, and now it's summer. It's been stewing. You debate skipping it. But you don't. You're too proud. And annoyingly too responsible. You reach the granary and find the pot exactly where you expected it, tucked under the steps, half covered by a burlap sack. You lift the lid and you recoil. It's moving. Not fast. Not wildly. Just burbling. Gently. Like a swamp exhaling. You pause. Consider. Then mutter. All right, my bubbling nemesis. Let's dance. You scoop carefully. 1 ladle. 2. The waste jiggles like it knows you're there. You're halfway done when a fat drop of rain hits the surface and triggers a pop that nearly makes you drop the bucket. You finish. Barely. Your reward? A slippery stumble on the way out that leaves you with a splashed sleeve and a bruised hip. You mutter something undignified and shuffle back toward the depot, grumbling all the way. By the time you rinse off, the sky is starting to lighten. You sit, soaked, stinking, and exhausted, watching steam rise from your buckets like ghosts giving up. And yet, you smile. Because disaster night or not, you made it. You kept your route. You finished your shift. And you didn't pass out in a compost pit. Victory. You don't talk about your first spill. No collector does, not really. It's a shared trauma, like a rite of passage sealed in shame and stink. But tonight, as you sit on a dry crate behind the depot, watching the sky turn that thin milky blue of near dawn, your mind drifts back. Uninvited. Unstoppable. Your mentor at the time was Old Pay, a man with a voice like gravel and lungs permanently scented with clove smoke and compost. He'd hauled night soil for 3 decades before passing the route to you. They said he once emptied 36 pots in a single night without losing his balance. Legend. Myth. Possibly a liar. You were new. Eager. Stupid. You'd oiled your yoke, polished your ladle, even wrapped a silk scarf around your mouth because you thought it made you look professional. Old Pay took one look at you and said, "Boy, you're dressed like you want to collect perfume." He gave you the light route that night. 4 stops. All ground level. No dogs. No cursed privies. No haunted shrines. Should have been easy. It wasn't. The second house on the list, some tea merchant who fancied himself a poet, had a courtyard latrine with a narrow ledge and a ceramic pot perched precariously on a stone step. You approached with exaggerated care, your yoke balanced perfectly, your ladle in hand like a samurai about to strike. You never saw the moss. 1 foot slid. The yoke tipped. Your weight shifted the wrong way. And then, a moment of suspended horror. The sound it made still haunts you. A slosh, a splat, and something like a sigh. And you, your pristine scarf, your confidence, your dignity, all disappeared into a steaming puddle of yesterday's dumplings and despair. You screamed. Of course you did. You flailed. You slipped again trying to get up. You were 16. Your pride was the only thing heavier than your buckets. And there you were, half covered in your client's digestive history, staring at your mentor like a dog expecting punishment. Old Pay didn't yell. He laughed. Not a chuckle. Not a smirk. A full, wheezing, belly-rattling howl that echoed through 3 alleys and woke at least 2 cats. When he finally stopped, he said, "Congratulations. You're official now. You wanted to die. But instead you stood up. You scraped off what you could with a broken roof tile. And you finished the route. Covered in horror. Swallowed by humiliation. Historians still argue whether night soil collection was considered a caste-defining occupation or one of those paradoxical trades that mix disgrace with necessity. Some city registries recorded collectors as untouchables, yet others list them alongside carpenters and butchers, skilled trades essential to urban life. But in your world, status isn't about what the city says. It's about whether you finish the job without letting the job finish you. That night changed you. Not all at once. But it planted something. You learned how to read the ground, how moisture pools, how bricks settle, how shadows trick the eye. You learned to test the weight of every pot before you lift it. You learned to double knot your sandals and never trust a dry-looking stone. You also learned that everyone, has a first spill. Even Old Pay, though he never admitted it directly. Just hinted at a chamber pot incident, involving a goat and a thunderstorm. You've filled in the gaps yourself. Now years later you train your own apprentice. He's a skinny kid with good instincts and terrible posture. Keeps trying to carry both buckets without adjusting for tilt. You told him a dozen times. Balance before bravery. He nods like he understands, then immediately does the opposite. You're waiting for his spill. Not because you're cruel. Because it's part of the job. It's distinct trial. The fall from grace that scrubs away any illusion of cleanliness or detachment. After that, you either quit, or you become a collector. You think about that kid tonight as you finish your final pickup, a silk dyer's assistant who keeps their pot under the stairwell beside a vat of blue pigment. One wrong move and you'll come out looking like a decorative tile. But you've done this enough times now. Your hands move without thinking. Ladle, lift, pour, balance, lid. Done. No splashes. No slips. Just the quiet rhythm of a practiced trade. As you step into the side lane, you see someone ahead, a flash of clumsy movement. A yoke. A ladle. A nervous shuffle. It's your apprentice. He's struggling with a full load. You can tell by the wobble in his stride and the desperate way he looks at the alley like it's tilting. You stop him. Adjust his grip. Shift the buckets so the heavier one leans closer to his dominant side. He looks at you, grateful and embarrassed. "Thanks," he mutters. You grunt. "You'll still fall eventually. Just don't fall in front of the spice merchant. They never forget." He chuckles. First time you've seen him smile since his first solo run. You both walk in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of rope and the slow slap-slap of sandals on stone. Then he asks, "Did you ever spill?" You pause. Consider. Then answer, "No." He laughs, and you let him. Back at the depot, you both rinse out your buckets under a weak stream of collected rainwater. The sun is just starting to lift the night off the rooftops. Birds stretch. Smoke curls up from morning cook fires. You watch your apprentice tie off his bucket lids, slowly, but right. And you know, he'll be fine. Just as you were. Eventually. You know it's the final haul of the shift because everything is quieter. Not just the streets, but your own body. Your arms move automatically, your steps land in that weary, practice rhythm, and the weight of the yoke barely registers anymore. There's a strange kind of peace in it. A hush that only comes when everyone else is still dreaming, and you're walking the world as if it were yours alone. One more pickup. One last pot. Then sunrise. The route tonight ends near Bellflower Alley, a peaceful lane known more for its wind chimes than its waste. It's a good way to finish, a soft note to ease you into morning. You walk slow. Not because of fatigue, though that's always there, but because part of you doesn't want the night to end. Strange, isn't it? This work that chews up your spine and dyes your clothes with permanent smell somehow finds a way to be comforting. Predictable. Yours. You think of the nights ahead. The cycles. The new apprentices. The old tools. The buckets, worn smooth from so many hauls they might as well have names. You pass familiar landmarks. The tea house with the warped door, the cat-shaped lantern post, the patch of bricks that always shifts underfoot after rain. You notice everything. Collectors do. You've walked these streets too many times not to feel them breathe. You reach the last pickup. A scholar's home, always neat, always early. The pot sits waiting under the eaves, covered with a silk cloth. A little much, but you appreciate the gesture. You ladle slowly, carefully, not because you need to, but because you're stalling. Stretching the final moments. The buckets are full enough to jostle with every step now, heavy but even. You adjust your yoke and start the walk toward the gates, where the fields wait. This part of the journey is long, open, and exposed. You see the whole city from here, its rooftops like quiet waves frozen in clay. The sky shifts from ink to pewter to pale gold, and the first real birdsong breaks the silence. Not a crow. Not a rat. Not a whistle from a rival collector. Just the innocent chirp of something clean. And in that moment you allow yourself to feel what few in your profession admit aloud. Pride. Because despite the stink, despite the stares, despite the ache that grows deeper each year, you've done something no one else would. You've kept the streets passable, the farmers fed, the homes bearable. You are the city's silent engine. The hauler of what no one wants but everyone needs moved. You think about the stories you've collected, more than just waste. The haunted shrines, the rival turf wars, the public latrine negotiations, the palace porcelain, the apprentice's future spill. You think of the herbalists who swear by fermented matter, of the farmers who hold your buckets like treasure, of the child who asked if it was heavy and laughed when you said, "Depends." Historians still argue whether night soil collectors truly understood their place in the great machine of the Tang dynasty, or if they were simply survivors clinging to a foul but necessary role. But you know the truth. You're not just surviving. You're serving. And as you pour your final load into the compost trench just beyond the mulberry grove, its steam rising like incense, you feel the weight slip from your shoulders for the last time tonight. The buckets clatter gently as they settle. The wind shifts. You're done. The walk home is quiet. Lighter. Your hands are sore, your back screams softly, but your heart is still. You pass under the gate. The guards barely glance your way. You're part of the scenery now. A familiar face waits near your alley, your child, standing barefoot on the cool stone, holding a cup of warm ginger water. You take it. You drink slowly. They wrinkle their nose, but smile. You smell like cabbage ghosts, they say. You ruffle their hair. Inside, the house is dim. A small fire crackles in the brazier. A bath waits in a bucket behind the door, its water cloudy from boiled herbs and cheap soap. You sink into it slowly, breathing in through your nose for the first time all night. The stink is still there. But you've earned it. And tomorrow? It begins again. Wind down, 300 words. Now rest your head, collector. The buckets are scrubbed, the yoke's hung on its hook, and the streets behind you are clean, for now. The stink will fade by morning, replaced by breakfast smoke and the low murmur of vendors unrolling their mats. Your hands will stop trembling. Your back will stop creaking. Eventually, the city breathes again because of you. And though no one will sing your name or carve your likeness into stone, the gardens will grow, the tea leaves will steep stronger, and the children will play a little longer under a sun that never knew what you carried under cover of night. Forget the rats. Forget the ghost latrine. Forget the apprentice's inevitable fall. Let them wait. You've walked your streets. You've carried your weight. You've finished your route. So close your eyes. Let the soft whistle of early wind hum at your window. Let the memories of alleyways and moonlight turn pale in your mind, distant, harmless. There's no more sloshing. No more knocking. No more late-night breathless scrambles to catch a bucket before it tips your reputation into ruin. There's just you now. And the silence. And sleep. Because the job is done, collector. And you've done it well.